Hello and welcome back. In this video, we'll be continuing our discussion on customizations. Up first are business rules. Let's start by going over a quick example of when to utilize business rules. Let's say if a priority 1 incident is created, then we would like to create a problem record that references this incident. This is a great example of when to use a business rule, since the event is triggered once the incident is created, and also because we have access to the incident information when creating a new problem record. Business rules run off of a specific table. On the right, we have a screenshot of a business rule, and in the upper left, we can see the table is set to incident. You will always specify a table in business rules. Business rules allow administrators to write JavaScript, which is ran on the server side, so you can do some complex operations with business rules. Business rules can be configured when to run. They can run before a transaction to the database is executed, after a transaction to the database is executed, on display, which is before the record is displayed to the user, and asynchronously, which has to do with scheduled jobs and will be discussed later on in this course. We can also specify during what operation a business rule runs. There are options for inserting, updating, deleting, and/or querying a record. Now let's go over a quick example. We have a client or browser on the right side and the application server on the left side, along with a database server. The client makes requests to the application server, and the application server sends responses to the client. The application server also communicates with the database server to save or query data. In this example, the user first sends a request to the server for a specific incident. This would be a query request. The application server then requests the record data from the database server. The database server responds to the application server with the data, and then the application server checks for display business rules. The application server then sends the response back to the client. Note that the user has not been redirected to the form view until it has received the response from the application server. Once the user receives the response, they modify the incident record, and then they save the record to the database, which sends a request to the application server with the provided information. The application server receives the request, checks for before business rules, and then sends the data to the database server where it will update the record. Once the database server has finished the operation, the application server will then check for after business rules and then send the response back to the client. This was a quick example showing the query and update requests, as well as the before, after, and display business rules. Now we'll take a look at business rules in ServiceNow. Let's go into an incident record. For this example, we'll create a new business rule. Let's say we would like to set the state field to active when we update existing incidents. So if an incident already exists and we go into that record and update it, if the state is still marked as new, we would like to automatically change the state to active. To access business rules on the incident table, we can right-click the title bar, or gray header bar, and navigate to Configure Business Rules. Here you can see that we are viewing the business rules table with the filter of table equals incident or table and incident or task, since incident extends the task table. You can see there are 48 business rules that are specific to the incident or task table in this instance. Let's go ahead and create a new business rule. We'll provide a name and verify that the incident table is selected. This is pre-populated since we went into the business rules via the incident form. Now let's check the advanced option. This will show some additional fields on the form. Okay, so we would like this business rule to run when we update an existing incident record, which means if I create a new incident, I do not want this business rule to run. We'll select the update checkbox, and I want this to run before the database operation. We'll leave the order as 100, and now in the filter condition, we'll specify when we'd like this business rule to run. We'll provide the state field and select a value of new, so this will only run when the state field is new. We'll go into the Actions tab, where we can specify what field we'd like to set and provide the value of the field. In this case, we set the state field to active. We can also provide a message. In addition, there is an Advanced tab where you can add JavaScript if required. So to recap, this business rule reads as, when we make an update to an existing record, if the state is new, then before the database operation occurs, change the state to active. We'll go ahead and submit this and navigate to an incident to test it. As you can see, we have an existing incident here with the state of new. If we save the record, nothing happens because we have not modified any fields, so an update trigger is not being executed. We'll go ahead and add an exclamation to the short description field and save the record again. Now we can see that the state has automatically been set to active. Let's create a new incident, add a short description, and save the record. This will trigger an insert operation, which should not trigger the business rule. Now we'll add a caller, and then when we click Save, this will issue an update to the record and finally, we see the state is marked as active. We can also access business rules by typing in business rules in the application navigator. This will take us to the business rules table list view, which shows us all business rules in this instance. We'll navigate back into our business rule and mark this as inactive so it no longer executes. Now let's shift from the server side to the client side with client scripts. Client scripts allow us to write JavaScript and specify when it gets ran on the client side. Client scripts are often used in the form view, but may also be used in the list view. Client scripts can be ran on one of four triggers. They can be executed on load, that is when a record is loaded in the browser, on change when a field is changed in the browser, on submit when a form is submitted or saved in the browser, and on cell edit when a cell is modified in a list view. You have access to many helper methods in client scripts, which are similar to the helper methods in jQuery, if you're familiar with that library. Now let's take a look at client scripts in ServiceNow. Let's go into an incident record and right-click the title bar and navigate to Configure, Client Scripts. As you can see, there are 19 client scripts a part of the incident or task table. For the purposes of this demo, we'll create a new one. We'll provide a name, and once again, we see the table has been populated for us. Now we'll select a type of onChange and a field of state, which means every time the state field changes on the client side, the below script will be executed. You can see there is a UI type if we want to select whether this runs on the desktop or mobile. Now within the script, we'll write one line of JavaScript, which just simply says "Hello World." This is not a very practical example, but it does show how client scripts work. We'll submit the form and navigate into an incident. Now, when we change the state field, we'll see a pop-up of "Hello World." It's important to keep in mind that the JavaScript we wrote gets shipped to the client, so this is running in the client's browser. It's also important to note that there does not need to be a request and response for this. The script actually gets packaged up with the original form data, so no additional network traffic is required. This allows for a much more fluid user experience. Now we'll briefly talk about data policies. You can think of data policies as UI policies for the backend. That is, data policies restrict data on the server side as opposed to UI policies which work on the client side. So if you are using a web service or import set, data policies are used to restrict what comes through. Finally, that brings us to the last customization we'll discuss in this course, script includes. Script includes can provide a lot of utility to scripting in ServiceNow. However, due to their complexity, we'll just quickly go over them to give you an understanding of what they are used for. Script includes store JavaScript functions and classes on the server side. They provide a way to leverage reusable code. So if you have common functions that you use throughout the system, you can store it once within a script include and then just call it from within another script. Of course, they are stored on the server side. However, they can be invoked on the client side using something called Glide Ajax. Script includes are only ran when called, which improves performance. Now I'd like to summarize the customizations we've discussed in this section. Going back to the client-side versus server-side diagram, we have the client scripts, UI policies, and UI actions that are ran on the client side, while business rules, script includes, data policies, and UI actions are ran on the server side. We can see that UI actions are in both the client and server side, since they can be invoked on the client side as well. There are many other places in ServiceNow where you can provide customizations. However, for the purposes of this course and the ServiceNow administration exam, these customizations are the main focus. Finally, I'd like to end this section by providing a flowchart, which should only be used as a rough guide when determining which customizations to use for a modification. At the beginning on the left of the diagram, we have the question client or server. If we go to client, we have the question, will the field be required, read-only, or visible? If the answer is yes, then a UI policy will likely be the best option. If the answer is no, then a client script will likely be the best option. If we answered server on the first question, we'll be taken to the question, is it on a record action, such as when a record is inserted or updated. If the answer is yes, a business rule will likely be the best option. If the answer is no, we'll go to the third question. Does it involve a button or menu? If yes, a UI action should be used. If no, a script include will likely be your best bet. Again, this should be used as a rough guide and does not guarantee all answers of where customization should be applied.